Today, we're digging into Proposition 50. It's a measure on the California ballot that really gets to a fundamental question. Should we trust our politicians to draw their own election maps? And this is about more than just politics. It's really about fairness, integrity, and the rules of our democracy. So let's break it down. And this is really the heart of it all. See, back in 2008, California voters, people like you, intentionally created a system to stop politicians from rigging election maps. And now, those very same politicians are asking for that power back. It's kind of the classic fox wanting to guard the henhouse scenario, and it's a question we all really have to think about. So let's be really clear about where we're coming from in this explainer. We're going to be laying out the case for voting no on Proposition 50. We believe it's the best way to protect the fair and independent system that California voters already put in place, and to prevent the kind of partisan games that people are so tired of. Now, to really get what's at stake with Prop 50, we've got to go back a bit. Back to 2008. That was the year California voters made a pretty historic decision, one that really changed the game for our democracy here. So back in 2008, voters in California passed something called the Voters' First Act. And, this was a huge deal. It was a direct answer to years and years of partisan gerrymandering. It was voters saying, loud and clear, that they wanted a fair and open system. They literally took the power to draw district lines away from politicians and gave it to an independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. And that commission, well, it's become a model for the entire country on how to do this right. So why is it so important to protect this system? And what exactly would Prop 50 mean for its future? Let's take a closer look. There's a reason everyone calls California's Citizen Redistricting Commission the gold standard. It's made up of a bipartisan group of regular citizens, not politicians, and their whole job is to draw fair and competitive election maps. The whole process is done out in the open, with public hearings where communities all over the state can give their input, and that's just a world away from the old backroom deals and partisan games that you see in so many other states. So, if California's system is the best in the nation, why would anyone want to change it? Well, the answer, as you might guess, has a lot to do with the intense partisan politics happening on the national level. Supporters of Prop 50 say it's a necessary response to extreme gerrymandering in other states, like Texas, where maps have been drawn to give one party a massive advantage. This idea of fighting fire with fire, it's definitely a powerful one, and it makes sense to a lot of people. But here's the thing. Opponents of Prop 50 see this as a really dangerous path. They argue that if California starts its own partisan gerrymandering, we'd be giving up our moral high ground and just becoming part of the problem we're trying to solve. Jean Raya, who is the chair of California's very first independent redistricting commission, she said it perfectly. And that quote, it really just nails the central question, right? Do we want a government guided by principles of fairness, or one that's driven by political revenge? Okay, so this whole debate isn't just about political strategy. It's also about something really fundamental, honoring the decision voters already made and upholding our state's constitution. Let's dig into the legal and constitutional side of this. It's so important to remember that the Citizens Redistricting Commission isn't just some policy or a good idea. It is literally part of the California Constitution. Back in 2008, voters made a very deliberate choice to change our state's foundational document to guarantee that redistricting would be fair and impartial. Prop 50 would basically hit the pause button on that part of the Constitution, and for opponents, that feels like a huge betrayal of the trust voters placed in the system. And the fallout from this could be pretty serious. We're talking about the potential for years of expensive legal fights, with taxpayers picking up the tab. It could also create a really bad precedent, one that says voter-approved initiatives can just be tossed aside when they're politically inconvenient. And honestly, at a time when faith in our institutions is already pretty shaky, this could just make things worse. Now, people who support Prop 50 will tell you this is just a temporary fix, a short-term thing we have to do to deal with a national problem. But is it really temporary? Let's actually look at what that means. Yeah, this is not a one-time thing, not at all. Proposition 50 would give politicians the power to draw their own maps for the next 3 federal election cycles. That's 2026, 2028, and 2030. That's 6 years of putting our democracy back in the hands of the very people who have the most to gain from a tilted system. And look, we've seen this movie before, right? Once you give power back to politicians, they're not exactly in a hurry to give it up. What starts as a temporary solution can quickly become a permanent problem, and a so-called crisis can become an excuse for a long-term power grab. That's a risk that opponents of Prop 50 just aren't willing to take. So, what does this all boil down to for you, the California voter? It means you have a really important choice to make, one that's going to have a lasting impact on the future of our democracy right here at home. And to be fair, the folks who support Prop 50 are coming from a place of real concern. They look at our deeply divided country, and they believe California has a duty to use its political muscle to fight back against unfairness somewhere else. For them, this is about leveling a tilted playing field and making sure every vote counts nationally. But there is another way to see it. Opponents of Prop 50 argue that California's real strength isn't in its ability to play the same political games, but in its ability to inspire a better way. They see California as a beacon, a state that has proven to the rest of the country that a better, more fair democracy is possible. And by holding that line, even when it's hard, California can be a real force for positive change. So in the end, we're left with this question. Are we a state that's guided by our principles, or one that's guided by partisan power plays? Do we want to set an example for the rest of the country, or do we want to play by the very same rules that we say we're against? That's the choice at the heart of Proposition 50, and it's a choice that will absolutely define California's future for years to come.